One. What's up, everybody? Alex650. I guess this is part 2 of the photography learning tutorial class thing. So, you probably took a few pictures since the last time. Hopefully you have. If not, that's cool. You should go back and do that because you should always do your homework. And I'm one to talk because I never did my homework back in the day, but now I do! Now you learn how to slow down shutter. So you can actually like freeze motion like this, or you can speed up motion like this, or you can learn how to control things entirely, or you can let more light in when you're just taking stills for things. So you can let more light in for like star trails, landscapes, that kind of thing. You're kind of playing around with it. Now you kind of get a grasp on how the shutter speed thing works. Aperture. Aperture is basically the iris of a lens. If you ever take off a lens, you'll notice that there's this giant thing which simulates an iris. What that does is chokes light from coming into the lens, and it controls things like how much light you're getting and depth of field. Depth of field is a relative term. Depending on the focal length of the lens, which is just basically the millimeter length. So right now I'm shooting on a 16 mil. Versus like 70 mil will have different ranges of aperture and different ranges of depth of field, and it also is relative to how close or what you were doing. So basically, if you have let's say an object and it is sitting there, the closer you get to your object, the shorter that depth of field will get. The farther away, the bigger the depth of field will get. So if I have something that is, let's say if you're rocking a kit lens, your kit lens is probably an 18 to 55 and it's a f3.5 to 5.6, and what that means is the further you zoom in, the less aperture the less open the aperture will be. This is one of those things that's really screwy with photography. The lower the number, the wider it is. The higher the number, the smaller the aperture is. So an f22 or an f25 is going to be like a pinpoint, like very small, and an f2.8 is going to be really wide. An f1.8 and f1 is just going to be the biggest opening you've ever seen. It'll pretty much be a non-existent curtain inside the lens. Depth of field is nice when you can control things like if you want to shoot portraits or headshots and you're out in general public. So you'll have your subject in focus, and then you will have nothing behind it going on or anything like that. This specific thing in photography opens up a whole new ballpark for everybody. So if you're shooting landscapes, chances are you're probably just going to go f22 or f16, something really wide, infinity focus, shoot the whole damn thing. No one cares, it's all in focus, that's great. So your eye's going to travel around like crazy, you're going to have a lot of detail. If you don't want that, let's say there's something in the picture that I want you to pay attention to. I will focus on that, and I will widen my aperture like crazy. So if I want somebody in front of a landscape, and I don't want the landscape in perfect focus, but I want it kind of fuzzy, I want them to be more of the focal point of it, then I would probably choke it down to maybe f6, f5, somewhere around that area, maybe 3, 4, depending on how things go. The math on aperture is insane. It's very difficult. It's very hard to understand if you're not a math kind of guy. I was not. I was terrible at math, but for some reason I picked up photography. I don't know why. So, that being said, your way to control this, or way to practice on something like this, is you find a lot of something that you want not in focus. So I would get a string of fence posts or a lot of cars or something that's a long line of something. And you could practice this very easily with that long line of something. Just take your aperture down, take the number down, blow out the aperture wider, and then focus in on one specific thing. That one specific thing is what you're trying to get in focus. It's been a long day. I also have no affiliation with this company. I just like the beer. That being said, we're going to turn our dials to aperture priority. Look up in your manual, you'll see aperture priority. If you don't have a manual, go online, punch in your camera, say aperture priority this camera, and it'll tell you almost immediately within probably the first 3 results on Google. So we're going to control that. As far as homework goes, learn to play with that. Try and get a few things in focus. Try and get a few things out of focus. Change that depth of field area. Maybe you want to shoot a couple or a friend or anything like that. Do the headshot idea where you get them in focus, nothing in the background's in focus, nice blurred out background. Then try something with the same person and everything's in focus. Or you just want a little bit of focus. So maybe somebody in the background is a little more in focus, but everything else is not, kind of thing. Learn the ratio of your lens. Learn what aperture acts where, how long it is. I know roughly you'll get to a point where your gut will tell you this needs to be at an f8, or if I'm using this lens, this needs to be at an f5 to get to where I need to go, or an f5.6, or maybe an f11. It's hard at first controlling this, but once you have that down, it gets almost second nature. It's very, very smooth, very easy, and like I said, it's one of those things that's, you're going to have to program your brain to learn this. But after you get that done, post a few pictures on Facebook. If you want, leave your Facebook link in the comments below. As far as your homework goes, I would love to see them. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. I take emails or comments. I answer all my comments like religiously. So all about you guys, right? Also, aperture will control how much light is let in. So if you're having a hard time shooting indoors, you're also closer to your subject, chances are you might want to open up your aperture like crazy. I know when I shoot indoors, I basically don't shoot above an f8, like ever. Ever. I also bring a flash to supplement light, but we're not getting into flash photography yet. This is just basics, bare bones, baby steps. We're going to learn to crawl before we can run, and we're going to learn to run before we can fly.